Don Helm. I'm with Becker Automotive. I'm creating this video in case you need help with the internet in the Escalade, and I'll show you a few features of the router as well. So the first thing we'll want to do is log into the router, which means you're on the Escalade's Wi-Fi. Then you open a browser and you're going to enter this address, 192.168.1.1, and that will get you to this PepWave login. And we'll use admin as a username, and the password is 1PEPWAVEPASS. If you didn't get that, I'll display it on the screen. So, username and password. Okay. Now, as you see, we have a Verizon SIM card here as we're in the States. Once you get your SIM cards installed in the router, you want to make sure, well, they should both be, you can change the priority of your connections here just by dragging them. But once your SIMs are installed, you log in, and we clicked on details there, as you saw right here. We generally use an automatic network mode, and then you may need to enter an APN, and I just wanted to show you this is where you enter your APN. Generally in the States, we'll click on data roaming. So we'll go to the top. This is your SIM number. Your mobile telephone number will display here. And that is, of course, the mobile telephone number of your internet connection. Electronic serial number for the router, or for this radio in the router. Your IMEI number of the router, which is different than the one in the car. This is our test bench. And it just gives you some general signal strength information, IP address. You see it all here. Under the WAN connection settings, we generally use auto here in the United States. I think that you'll use either auto or generic. Generally, we'll do DNS automatically. Standby state, remain connected. That way you get a faster switch if you need to. And then we just leave these settings alone. We generally leave all these as default. Of course, I did check data roaming, so you may want to check that. And when you choose custom, you can add your own, well, your carrier's access point name, APN, here. Generally, we don't fill these fields out at all here. The acceptable level is going to be where does the router let go of the connection and perhaps switch over to the other SIM card. You can experiment between these two, where it's almost completely gone versus, as you see, the signal strength here. You know, just common sense tells you. And you can make your own decision there. And generally, we leave these as default, and then save and apply. And once you've done that to your first SIM card, then you can go ahead and move on to the second SIM card. Now, there's obviously, you saw there's no SIM detected here, so it doesn't really give us all the options, but it really doesn't, and this is a T-Mobile APN here. doesn't really allow us to do anything here since it doesn't have a second SIM. But it's just like the first SIM, so it's redundant. You'll probably use a different carrier, I would imagine, for the second SIM so that you could maybe catch some areas that the first SIM doesn't connect to, provided you actually have a few options. You can make that choice. The network tab you have LAN in the first field here. And I just wanted to point out that we want to leave this where it is, and also the IP range for the DHCP. We want to leave that where it is. It's going to be a little different than what we see here. It's probably at 190. This is not actually in a vehicle, so it's not as critical, but this would be the settings that you should have in your car. And as I said, you want to leave that the way it is, and then once you make a change, you may need to click Apply Changes up at the top of the window. Now, Advanced. There is something that you may or may not want to take advantage, and that's the outbound policies. We can add some rules here. Default is persistence. So what it does is it does try to connect, hold a connection for as long as possible. And I'm sorry I can't give you a better explanation on that one. But I will show you another option or another rule that we can add. And that is, we call that low latency. And generally, we'll use that on any source to any destination. And then we'll choose any here. And then, now weighted balance, we'll try to balance the usage of two, well, what we're concerned with are SIM cards. You can actually use it for more than that, but we only use SIM cards in the vehicle for connections. So you would choose cellular 1, cellular 2 if you want to balance the connection or the usage of these SIM cards. But the problem with that is that if you simply one SIM doesn't connect well because the coverage isn't very good, and when it tries to balance those two, you're really kind of making it difficult to do so if there really is only one solidly working connection. But what does work well, in not all cases, but many, is lowest latency. So when you choose your two cellular connections with lowest latency, it does use a little bit of data because it's constantly checking the connections, but that will allow the router to use the fastest of the two radio connections. So that is something that is used fairly often. AP is the access point, so if this would be Escalade in your vehicle, when you connect, click on that, you can see the security policy, which in that vehicle will be personal, and it'll have the password here, and you can go in here and change the password. Well, we'll cancel that since I'm not going to fill that out. System is where you're going to want to check your firmware. Really isn't a whole lot you'll want to do there other than that. The vehicle is shipped with the latest firmware, and it is new. It's only a couple weeks old, so it will be a while before you need to be concerned about that. But it is a good idea to keep the firmware up to date. Here you can change the password to get into the router. I don't know that that's necessary. If it gets lost, then I'm not going to know how to help you with that. Firmware, again, we'll go back to firmware, and you can simply just click check on firmware, and it will tell you whether there's an update available or not, and you can just go ahead and update it here, or you can go to Peplink and download the firmware on their firmware page, which is easy to find on a Google search. So that is actually the better way to do it. You would choose the file, which is not on this computer, and simply manually upgrade it. Status. In status, you can see your client list, who's logged into the router. You can get usage reports. You can see how much data you're using. You can choose to check just certain. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with the computer. Which connections, cellular 1, cellular 2, and see how much data you're actually using. And you can go by monthly, daily, hourly. Here, there we go. And that is the real basics of the Peplink router. If you have any other specific questions, just reach out to us and we'll do what we can to answer those. Thank you for your time. I hope this helps. Goodbye.